AJ Glasser. I'm on the developer relations team at Meta. My boss, Melissa, killed it this morning, so yay for that. I'm here to give you a talk on building trusted experiences in the metaverse, and I have some amazing panelists I'd like to introduce. Coming out, Jesse Schell, CEO of Schell Games. We also have with us Morgan Tucker, head of UGC at Rec Room. Last but not least, James Shepard. He's head of studio at nDreams. Their game Ghostbusters is coming out next month. All right, so we will have a seat and get to talking about the experiences that each of you have built in the metaverse as we know it today, which is structured largely around apps. Each of you operates what we would call a multiplayer game, but they're very, very different from one another. So Jesse, beginning with you, can you tell us a little bit about how multiplayer is built in Among Us?
So for people who don't know Among Us, it's a game all about a group of astronauts on a spaceship who are trying to do their jobs, but one of them, or sometimes more than one of them, is an imposter who is trying to take them down. And so the multiplayer there is really interesting because it's a mix of friends coming together, strangers coming together, and it has there's a lot of communication because the game involves a lot of discussions amongst the players about who's good and who's not good. And so it's for us, it's been very interesting multiplayer because it's the first time we've done real-time voice multiplayer. And so there's definitely a lot of challenges there.
Awesome. All right, Morgan, what's it like in Rec Room?
Yeah, so Rec Room is primarily a social experience. So it's multiplayer by default. Basically, players create their avatars, they make friends, they chat. They can also go and make their own experiences within the platform, and they share those with one another. It's incredibly deep, it's incredibly social. So taking advantage of voice chat, which is on by default, and also all the rich kind of gesturing and kind of mechanics that come along with VR, make it a truly immersive, like really, great experience. It feels like you're there with your friends. So it's an awesome thing.
James, what's it going to be like in Ghostbusters when it goes live?
Well, I'm the kind of upstart in the room. I shouldn't be here really. nDreams, when we're so far behind these guys, and I'm here to get as much information out of them as I can, because we don't have a lot of multiplayer heritage, and Ghostbusters is our first kind of foray into that. Prior to that, we did a game called Far Cry Dive into Insanity from the Far Cry IP. It was brilliant, but it was a location-based shooter, and the trusted experience nature of this talk was really quite easy because you had someone walking through the arcade with you, making sure you didn't bump into the walls or bump into other people. And that really was a great experience for us. But when we got involved with Ghost Corp and Sony Pictures VR, like Ghostbusters itself demanded to be a multiplayer game more than we had to get into multiplayer. Because if you think about Ghostbusters, it's all about the team, isn't it? It's all about the four Ghostbusters. It's about Egon, who's serious and expert, and Venkman, who's just in it for the laughs and trying to pull girls, isn't he, really? And so our game's all about co-op, 1 to 4 player co-op, and it's not gated. Once you've got through the tutorial, like newbies can play with experts to kind of mimic that kind of Ghostbusters dynamic. And it's all about working together cooperatively. And the other thing we did structurally is the narrative is independent. It's unique to the individual rather than the team. So you can join a bunch of kind of like experts. They can help you with how you play, but you still get the coherent story when you get back to the HQ because you don't all see the same narrative at the same time. But fundamentally, it's all about that kind of like slapdash multiplayer fun that you associate with that kind of key Ghostbusters mechanic. So that's us.
Oh, that's a great one. So we have questions for each of you to kind of help the audience get to know you a little bit better and what each of you is specialized in. Morgan, Rec Room is the OG when it comes to social experiences in VR. And you've been around for so long and been with this platform as it's really grown up. How has your community evolved in all that time?
Yeah, so Rec Room is an amazing story, the way that it's evolved over time. We've seen incredible growth since our initial launch, which was on VR primarily. But in the past few years, we've also launched on just about every platform known to man. So we are really focused on two kind of fundamental principles, which is everyone can play and everyone can create. And so that means the device you have in front of you will allow you to meet up with other people in cross-play instance. There's no like separation between the platforms, and also let you create right there. So with those two things paired, we've seen incredible growth because we've now got players who are making experiences for other players, and it's become somewhat of a perpetual motion machine, which introduces all sorts of crazy things, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the safety side here, but just absolutely incredible creations from our community that continue to fuel the growth of the platform.
So I'm pretty old. We call it emergent play when someone has invented a new way to play with an existing game. And I think the king of emergent play would probably be Among Us, which itself did spring out of an older kind of party game. So Jesse, can you talk about Among Us' massive growth? Like it had the largest audience on debut on our platform, I think, to date.
Oh, it was really exciting for us to get the opportunity to, I mean, Among Us, the original, flat game of Among Us was just such a phenomenon. And when we had the opportunity to work on the VR game, first we had to stop because not every flat game is going to transition into VR. So we had to all stop and look at ourselves and say, well, wait a minute, is this a good idea? And as we started to explore it, we started to understand why it was a good idea. First of all, it's a game where you're going around trying to do jobs on a spaceship. Being able to do those in an immersive way with your hands, we realized, okay, that's fun. But then this is a game about sneaking up on people. And so the whole fact that like I'm here doing my job and I have to keep, you keep turning around in order to sort of see is somebody behind me, like that we realized like, oh, this is actually going to be better in VR. And so the fact that the game already had this tremendous following, people understood what it was, and what we realized was from the very moment we dropped the first little teaser trailer, everybody got it. Everybody got like, oh, we're going to have that experience, but in VR, like, oh, I want to try that. So it really, it was off to just a huge start, and it was a thing we were really concerned about, because if you blow the launch with if you have like network bugs when you launch a multiplayer game, like you are in terrible trouble. Like I've seen so many titles, they just bungle the technical networking launch and they fail to recover from that. So that was the thing that we had a lot of stress about, but it worked out, and by making it work out, it's been able to kind of have a lot of great momentum over time.
So not to scare you, James, for your day one, how are you feeling about that next month?
Yeah, there's going to be some issues. We're sure of that, and like as even like 18 months ago, like I was myself and kind of like the lead engineers, we were saying to the team that like the last things that are going to happen are going to be desync issues. They're the bugs we're going to be struggling with, and it will be the multiplayer, kind of just the core tech of that will be the last things we get across. And like the team are working on it right now on UK time, and we are squashing those final kind of things. But but I feel really confident about the overall play experience, and I think that's what I really want to see. I mean, and like I know it's really good because it's when you're in a game and the game actually bedevils its own development on occasion, because you're in a meeting and it's like, okay guys, we're going to look at the graphics in Chinatown now, and like 4 people are in the game, it's my turn to take notes. And everyone's not even looking, and they're just using the Proton 1 to destroy the environment, so there's no graphics to review because they're all getting carried away. And because one of our key pillars was the combat is improvised and the results are messy. Because when the Ghostbusters always destroy the restaurant, they always destroy the hotel in the course of getting the ghost. So we'd have these environmental reviews. There'd be no environment to review at the end of it because they had destroyed it. And we were having to go, come on, focus, guys. So I want to see players experiencing that core second to second. Then the second thing, I want to see is that we have a lot of mechanics where you can help someone, you can stand back and heal someone, you can get in and just attack the ghost, or you can try and do the objective. And it's quite nuanced and it's quite free in how you want to do that. And I want to see the players do the stuff we've seen in kind of user tests that works really well. And the third thing, being brutally honest, is it's such a universal IP that's been going so long. You know, you've got like my kids who are like into Afterlife. You've got like people, you know, my age who remember the original movie at the time, and like, you know, you've got hardcore fans who are like, you know, are the original characters in it? Is there going to be Slimer? You know, why is the game this and not maybe what I was expecting? And my third kind of aim that, like, you know, we're working on with our kind of like PR and our outreach and stuff is like bringing those people on board and showing them that this is a kind of a long-term project with change and growth that's going to try and, you know, we've been looking at the kind of stuff these guys do and like trying to apply that to this universe. So that's my kind of third super stretch goal that we're working on right now.
All right. So what tools and frameworks are you building these experiences on top of to make them reliable, sustainable? Jesse, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, so Among Us is built in Unity, and then we used Photon for networking. And for us, moderation was very important, and we've been working with ToxMod as a platform for AI moderation. So,
Some stands in the crowd already. What about you, Morgan?
Yeah, so similarly on the technology side, Unity-based, working with ToxMod, but I think some of the things that are important to Rec Room are actually more fundamental in terms of introducing players really early on to the concept of a code of conduct. Like, this is how we expect you to act. So the number one rule is, you know, be excellent to one another. We expect you to act that way. If you don't, it's totally within your fellow players' rights to report you, et cetera. And I think that sets a good tone and a good starting place to kind of avoid some potential downstream cascades. It doesn't solve everything, but I think, again, letting people know, just like the real world, like if you walk into the middle of Disneyland and start shouting obscenities, people are going to look at you kind of weird. But if you do that in a bar, maybe it's okay. I think you got to set the context to give people the kind of appropriate way to move forward.
Okay. What tools, frameworks, do you know off the top of your head what you're going to be using? Photon?
We do use Photon, but like a lot of our stuff has been done in conjunction with a company called TLM, who do a lot of the online stuff with us. We've worked very closely with Amazon Web Services, and they've been very good, to be honest, with like helping us kind of shape what we need to do. And yeah, again, it's a kind of, because it's a universal kind of family-friendly thing, like we've looked to these kind of guys for similar kind of stuff. So, you know, you can, if you don't like what an individual's saying, you can mute an individual locally in the game or forever. You can mute everybody in the game world, which does work quite well, because with VR you can communicate so much gesturally that like sometimes the game still works really well. If you end up in a toxic environment that you really don't like, you can move to single player, and like, because there will be people on occasion where their equipment's not as advanced, that, you know, and they might get treated like a noob player, and we can't, you know, say that won't happen. And so you can go into solo mode. You have an assistant that helps you out, AI assistant, and get more powered up and come back. And of course, you know, if anything untoward happens, you can like grief and complain, and it goes up through all of your kind of services. So like we think we're pretty covered for initially at launch at least. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So actually, I want to get a little bit more into the mute thing. When we talk about building a trusted community, for example, what are the baseline, in your opinion, tools that a user needs to see to trust that experience is going to take care of them? Is it just mute? Is it ban? Is it block? Is it all three? How do you feel?
I would jump in. I'd say the more dimensions you can have, the more different ways and methods you can have to help players feel safe, help them feel they're taken care of, and help them feel that they are in control of the situation. Because you know, part of what people are looking for in these experiences often is kind of a rambunctious time, right? I mean, we look at a game like Among Us, you talk about setting a context. This is a game about murder and lying, right? And so it sets sort of a strain, like it sets some context that can potentially be difficult. And so for that reason, to kind of avoid toxicity, yep, you need muting, you need being able to block, you need being able to report players, and then you need the You need the players to understand that they are being observed and that there is an expectation that that antisocial behavior is not going to be tolerated here. And so all of those things are really important for making players feel safe. One new feature we've been experimenting with that I am expecting we're going to be bringing out soon is before you go into a game of players, because there's a matchmaking, of course, right? And you go matchmaking, normally you go matchmaking, and here you are playing with these players. We're experimenting with the ability to, before you jump into the game, you actually get to observe a current player set and how are they behaving.
Check the vibe.
Yeah, you can check the vibe. They don't know. You can observe them from the outside, and if you don't like the vibe, I'm going to go pick a different group to be a part of.
Ooh.
And that gives, again, it's one more thing to give players control over, okay, I feel good about this experience, this social experience I'm going to have.
Well, that's pretty neat. So like pro-social design, you talked about antisocial, things you don't want to have in your experiences, but what do you build then to encourage pro-social behaviors? So helping, co-op, or being social, like what are some tools? Do you want to talk a little bit about the home environment, how you had to turn off the wand?
Oh yeah, so because I agree with everything you've said there, and that's a really good idea. I'm going to think about that. And so, yeah, beyond all the kind of mechanical things that you can do to make sure these things aren't happening or can be reported, what we've tried to do is like put good behavior into the mechanics and stuff. And like, so yeah, we found that when you're in the Ghostbusters HQ, there's a lot to do. There's kind of weapons to equipment, sorry, not really weapons in Ghostbusters, but equipment to upgrade. There's the mission to select. There's things to train with. You can go and look at the ghosts that you've captured. And we found at one point when people could fire their proton wands off, and it was like, you know, burning and scorching all of that environment, so you couldn't, people would scorch it so you couldn't see the ghost you're trying to look at, or you couldn't see the kind of upgrade station. And we thought there's so much to do there, and so much, that's a moment in between the kind of jobs that you're doing that you want it to be a little bit calm. We just turned off the proton wands in that section, and no one has ever really even noticed or complained ever since we did that. And then the other thing we've tried to do is you get points and reward for playing in a team well. And we've tried to really kind of promote that. Like a lot of games, like if you're in a team and you're downed, your teammate can come and revive you, yeah? But in a lot of games, you're stuck, or your movement's really curtailed, yeah? And so it's a pain for me if you're downed way over there and I'm trying to do something here and I've got to get over there. I'm like, oh, they've been downed all the time. You know, I am getting frustrated with that player now. And then bad behavior can kind of come from that. So with us, because it's just kind of like it's ecto and, you know, you get kind of ectoed and you're not really dead, we decided not to limit the player's movement. So I can be totally slimed. And so I can't interact with the ghosts or the world. All of my equipment is totally gunked up. But all I've got to do is high-five another player, and my movement isn't curtailed. So, you know, he's trying to get the ghost. He's really embroiled. And all I've got to do is go, hey, and he's like, oh, yeah, bang, yeah, I'm still doing this. And then we actually made it in the end that, like, all I've got, I can actually slap him on the back. Do you know what I mean? Bang. And then, oh, I'm suddenly revived, yeah. And we found that then it became much less of a weight on me as a player, but I'd still get a point if he came up and just, like, you know, tapped me on the head and revived himself. That, like, people were really, really, you know, they're like, hey, I didn't have to make any effort, and I got all those extra points and credits, and I can upgrade my stuff much quicker. And, like, we've tried to do a number of those little mechanics that just kind of, like, really engender and foster good play.
Yeah, similarly, I think we take advantage of some of the gestures, high-fiving, thumbs up, et cetera, to really promote some of the pro-social behavior that you're describing. So cheering other players on the platform is a big part of the culture. So whether that's giving them a cheer just because they did something great, or they've built something amazing, or they've taken a great picture, that's really woven into the fabric of the social aspects of what we're doing. But yeah, I think what we see generally speaking is people pick up on those cues, that it's more fun, it's better to be nice to each other, generally speaking. Not that there aren't griefers. But also going back to some of the things that Jesse was talking about, using mechanisms like matchmaking to sort of put people in similar, let's see, similar play patterns in certain instances is helpful as well. So I think we really want to use everything at our disposal to sort of intercept that behavior as it happens, but really also address kind of root causes with both pro and kind of other pieces there.
So to just touch on lightly what each of you has sort of referenced but not gone after directly, bad actors in your apps, players who are just having a rotten day or people who are just sort of rotten people ruining the fun for others. What are some systems that you've had to develop to address that? I guess, James, this is not for you yet, but listen to what these two have to say. Okay. Want to talk about Rec Room?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we, again, like I said earlier, are on a lot of platforms. And so specifically mobile, we've seen a lot of younger players come on. It was always very important to us to make sure that they are protected, that they are safe. So we introduced the notion of a junior account on the mobile platforms. And right now, junior accounts make up about roughly 10% of our player base. So I think we're kind of ready for it. And what a junior account looks like on Rec Room is there are limitations in both what they can see and what they can, push back out into the world. So we're protecting PII by giving them randomly generated usernames. They can't, use free-form text. They're also, they don't have voice chat enabled, so that helps a lot. So definitely like safety first and foremost for our younger users. But we see that they're a really valuable, really energetic part of the community, and it goes back to those first principles for us that everybody can play and everybody can create, and really trying to make sure that we live up to that promise.
Awesome.
Yeah, the call we made with Among Us was that we did some age gating, voice only enabled for 16 plus is the way the game has been rolling because we just wanted to be really safe about it. Now that the platform is kind of going down to 10 plus, there's a lot happening here where we're going to be reevaluating where we want to have the gating exactly. But for us, we're already set up. We have like the voice version and the textual version. When we support both of those, so we're talking about exactly where that boundary should be. And part of what we're doing is trying to make sure that the non-voice version has the best interface it possibly can. So now that we're kind of potentially expanding the number of players who are going to be using the non-voice version, we want to see if we can do more to make sure that it also has a great interface.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for everything that you've had to tell us today. That was a really awesome session, and we're going to open it up to Q&A now. So if you have a question, put up your hand, and someone will run to you with a microphone. All right. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, great. Okay, cool. I'm Jonathan Hamill. I'm at another Axiom, so we make Gorilla Tag, and I was at Ready It's On working on Echo VR, so I have so many questions that probably I should just talk to you afterwards. But I really wanted to drill into the weeds on, I'm trying to decide between the two things I want to talk about. I think it's blocking that I want to talk about. And this is maybe targeted more at Jesse because it's a competitive game, like Tag is and like Echo VR was. We were acquired by Facebook or by Meta in 2020, so my time at working with the Echo VR team spanned both before and after that. And the team ended up investing a great deal on this ghosting feature, no relation to Ghostbusters, because just to dive into the technical weeds for a second, the problem with blocking is if you're trying to build a team quickly with a matchmaking algorithm, and you've grabbed, 8 people for your 4v4 game who have about the same MMR, but A has blocked B, B has blocked C, C has blocked D, then it's very difficult. And so even though we were getting all this advice, just allow blocking, it doesn't work. It would have dramatically increased matchmaking times. It would have been very difficult. So we invented this ghosting feature where you could say, okay, I don't want to see that person. I don't want to see their gestures, their little floating head. They can't talk to me. They can't grab me. They can't touch me, which I think was successful. And yet, our community still got a lot of criticism for the kinds of things that women and other people who are typically harassed have done to them. So I was very curious, like when you faced that problem in Among Us, like how have you solved it? And what do you think are potential future innovations for addressing that problem, particularly when you're trying to efficiently matchmake groups of people?
Yeah, so in terms of the efficient matchmaking, I think we should probably talk offline because that's actually a fairly complicated. But for me, it very much comes down to having the multiple systems, being able to support banning, being able to support muting, being able to support blocking, being able to support these in kind of multiple different dimensions so that people have the control that they want at that given time. And even though yes, it makes the matchmaking more difficult, finding ways to just deal with it. Because the more that you deal with it and deal with it well, the less it happens, right? Because if you can kind of change the norms of the community, people don't need to ban and block and mute so much, and so it becomes like less of a problem. So it's sort of like there's a weird balance for it, but by no means can I look at it and say, well, we solved toxicity. Like, no, like this is a reality of the human condition, and it's kind of an ongoing concern that you just keep trying to do. Let's figure out how we can do the best. How can we make it a little better, a little better, a little better all the time?
We are in our last 5 minutes. There's one more question. She's right here.
You just get your community vibe outside of just the game. You've talked a lot about how you promote good behavior and punish bad behavior within the game. How do you translate that to your outside communities, your Discords, your outside pages where you'll have bigger groups of people gathered together?
I can start. So the same code of conduct that exists in the game exists for our social outlets. So the Discord servers for Rec Room are super, super populated, super exciting and energetic. But yeah, same thing. It's like it's generally speaking like a fairly respectful community, and when people come in and see that that is the norm, generally speaking, that's how they behave. And there's always outliers to deal with. But I think there's an opportunity too, because in Rec Room specifically, you're making content that a lot of time is actually shared off-platform, out of game. I'm taking pictures of the things I'm making videos, I'm posting them on TikTok, and so the community follows. So generally we see that what works in the game sort of like moves out with it.
I would say great community managers is incredibly important. Like that is a thing that just can't be underestimated because the community managers can do so much to set the tone of what's acceptable, what's normal, what's encouraged, what's discouraged. So yeah, shout out to community managers who are often one of the underappreciated aspects of like what really makes online communities work.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think the cadence of response is really important so that your community feels like you are being super responsive and it's like super vibrant and that they're not like shouting out a complaint into the ether that will get addressed in a couple of days' time. Do you know what I mean? Just the more you put into it, the more you can shape the community to like be the community that you want. Do you know what I mean? Simple as that.
It is. Thank you so much, each of you, for coming out here today and sharing with us how to build trusted experiences. And thank you from the audience for such wonderful questions. So we'll catch you for some demos. We'll catch you in the hall for follow-ups.